Thank you. Hello, hello. Oh, yeah, no, we're still having, there's no mic. Sibilance. He can, okay. I mean, I'm fine, it's just not microphoning. Okay.
Now it sounds different. Yeah.
Does it?
Not really.
I,
Can you hear me?
I don't hear microphone.
wait a minute, so,
Yeah, maybe someone's like. Someone just put
I did it when I sat down, but not,
should I just keep going?
Test. No, it's not. It's not.
not me.
I mean, it's, you can hear it. I mean, there's not like a giant crowd. I can start. Okay. Well, he said as long as he can hear it, we're fine. Sorry, I'm just organizing. Okay. I will now call to order the February 1st, 2024 Board of Education meeting. We acknowledge, hello. We acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Chumash, Tongva, Fernandinho, Tatavaim, and First Nations on which we are learning, educating, and living. Mr. Becky, would you mind leading us in the pledge this evening? Please rise if you are able.
Okay, put your right hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can always tell when a teacher does it because it's so nice and like well-paced. Yes. Ms. Giterio, please take the roll call at this time.
Member Ferguson. Member Ferguson is absent today. Member Tabbitt.
Present.
Clerk Poncher Kamkar.
Present.
Vice President Agakanian.
Present.
President Weisberg.
Present. We will move on to reporting on closed session. We had one item that we voted on. For this one, do I need to do it? Can I just read the vote, or do I need to read specific how each individual voted? Okay. So we met in closed session and voted to approve the resignation agreement and general release for employee number CM144-23. The ayes, Shar Tabbitt, Armand Agakanian, Abby Ponser Kamkar, and myself, Emily Weisberg. One absent, Steve Ferguson. Adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any adjustments to this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to 7 items for future agendas. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to go back?
No, I jumped the gun. I had too much caffeine.
Oh, good. Item for future agenda. Yeah.
So, Madam President, I would like to see if we can go back and revisit the Incubator and Center for Entrepreneurship and see where we are on that, and maybe bring back a report to the board. Absolutely. Thank you.
And I imagine this will also be something that we'll discuss at the joint meeting.
Yes, that's what it is.
Great.
We don't have a date.
No, they're going to be floating some shortly. Okay. Oh, please. Great.
Thank you, President Weisberg. I'm trying to get my notes up here. I had a couple. One was, and maybe this is also for the joint meeting, but understanding the funds in the joint use budget with the city and where those are being spent and how they can be possibly spent. And then I just make a request that I believe we're going to have the FICMAC report at the next meeting. And so I'm hoping that after that, at the next possible meeting, that we could talk about a bond, please.
Excellent. Thank you. You beat me to it.
You got
Great. Any other future agenda items? Great. Seeing none, I don't believe we have any presentations or recognitions this evening. Ms. Quiterio, am I right about that? Sweet, thank you. 9, we're going to move on to reports for the board. We have no student representatives with us tonight for a very good reason. There is a giant Burbank basketball game, priorities. So we miss them. We will see them next meeting. And I also got a lovely email from Principal Weaver from Monterey saying they are looking to find a fabulous new representative because their previous one has gone back to Burbank High. And I messed that up last meeting. I thought she had graduated. She has not yet, but will. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 10, request to address the board. Any individual or group representative present this evening may address the Board of Education on any agenda item by completing a white request card and turning it in to Ms. Quinterio. Speakers are requested to state their name prior to speaking to the board. Not more than 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker, except by unanimous consent of the Board of Education. The superintendent may refer the matter to the proper department for review. The district is providing alternatives to in-person attendance for viewing and participating. Any individual or group representative may address the Board of Education on any agenda item or subject within its jurisdiction during one of the 3 public comment sections. We do not have any virtual public speakers, so we'll move on to in-person speakers. The first card I have is Schlossman, followed by Nicole Drebecki.
Good evening, everybody, once again. I noticed this is the second meeting that Board Member Ferguson is absent. I certainly hope he's okay, but my question is, how many meetings can a board member meet before it becomes before it becomes problematic? Ms. Weisberg, you asked everybody to please rise if you're able, and I think you're a hypocrite because you're able to rise, and you did not rise for the flag salute. So I question your verbiage. Item 13D on the agenda, you're going to have a little discussion about public speaking and the way you talk about and accept public comment. I hope you'll fix it so the callers can call in the night of the meeting like the city does it. I don't think there's any need to reinvent the wheel. I wish you'd stop changing the order of the agenda for people you like. I talked to you about that, Ms. Weisberg, previously, and you told me you were going to do things different from Ferguson, and then you did the exact same thing that Ferguson does. And you're confused about the words eliminating and combining, because when you combine, you're supposed to get both, and you eliminate one period, and it puts the public at a disadvantage because they may want to comment on things that you did during the meeting, and when you eliminate that last period, people can't participate. There was another fellow that came in named Andre, and he comes late, and he usually has something to say. And something odd happened at the last meeting. Aga Kanian got up and walked out, and they had a little meeting out in the hallway during a public meeting. I thought that was improper. Ms. Weisberg, I wish you would put some effort to understand what the First Amendment is and the 5 components of the First Amendment, because I've seen you on police body cameras, recordings, and you clearly have no idea about what the First Amendment is. Can you name the 5 of them? I'll tell you. It's freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom to petition. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm petitioning my government, in case you didn't know. Item 14K, consent agenda. Buried in that consent agenda is a settlement of $322,000. Now, I feel bad for us that we're taking $322,000 out of our general fund, I guess, to give to this kid. I feel bad for the kid involved. Something substantial must have happened. Of course, we'll never know the details because these settlements are confidential. But I wonder who was held accountable. Did you hold anybody accountable? Because this is a regular occurrence during the year. we have a number of these settlements, and it adds up, and we just don't have the money to give away like this. I wonder how you can be spending all this money on these settlements on one hand, and then come to the populace, the voters, the citizens, for a bond or a parcel tax. I mean, you're salivating to do it. But on this agenda, there's a lot of things that you're spending a bunch of money on, and I'm going to talk about it at the proper time. But you tell us that the monies that you don't have, it's like you say the sky is falling. But on every agenda, you're spending money on things that are questionable, wasteful, not necessary. Let me go back to that other agenda item that you're going to talk about. I think that you should give your attention to the speakers, and many of you don't. And I think you should include a ban on you folks using your cell phones, texting, emailing, using emails during the meeting. It's improper. I could talk about that for a long time, but it should be included. There should be you should set good examples, really. If you don't want the kids using them in the classroom, you shouldn't be using them yourselves. I'll be back.
Mr. Becky.
Good evening, President Weisberg, members of the board, Superintendent Paramo, and members of the district and staff. I'm happy to be here this evening. I want to talk about Agenda 14D. And so the person who's going to be getting some of the district's money, his name is Mike Lee. And I noticed originally he was going to be paid $30,000. And that has now changed to $75,500. And I believe his role is to support the new director of fiscal service transition. And he's going to be doing that job until June 30th of 2024. So, I don't know about the new director being hired and how long they've been there and what type of transition they truly need. I know we have had some issues in finance or fiscal services with not having enough people. So I just want to know why his services were extended. I see that he's going to be making $130 per hour, giving about 15 to 20 hours per week. When I think about my members in elementary and secondary, we have our secondary making $54.73 an hour, and then per period, and then elementary the same amount, $54.73 for their hour in elementary. So obviously, I think our members would love to be getting paid $130 per hour, like some of the people are at the district office. Knowing that we have budget deficits and we have declining enrollment, I'm a little bothered by that. And, maybe that number of $130 an hour is all that people are willing to give their time for. Maybe that's what their requirements are. But again, I just think it's a lot of money. And I just want to know basically what changed from the 30,000 originally to now 75,500. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brecky. Really appreciate it. Seeing no other cards, I am going to move to superintendent responses.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schlossman, for coming down and sharing your thoughts with us. Mr. Becky, it's good to see you always. Good to see you as well. And I'm going to ask our CBO, Andy Cantwell, to respond to your questions about Mr. Lee.
Mr. Becky, good evening. Great questions. And so I do want to take this opportunity to share a little about Mike Lee. He was previously the fiscal director in Glendale. was promoted to be controller over Glendale Unified for a number of years, which is the chief accountant position. Became the vice provost in a community college district here locally in LA County, where he oversaw administrative services, so a very similar function to what I currently hold. He came on and helped us in our time of need in September, October timeframe. If you recall, we were without a fiscal director since June. We hired a new fiscal director, Mariam Abdelhamid, on January 3rd was her first day. So we went nearly 7 months without a fiscal director. The savings to the district by having that position vacant, it was about $140,000. And so while I know this contract is significant, him serving as an interim fiscal director for the first 3 months was still a significant savings from if we actually had a full-time director. He and I tag teamed it together. And then now he is helping, again, the new fiscal director. She transitions. She has a wonderful background, extensive experience, but she is new to the state of California in school finance, and so he's going to help bring her into ensuring that both second interim and the budget adoption process for next year are really effective and utilizing some of the recommendations that FICMAT brings forward later this month.
Thank you.
Great. Board member responses. Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
As you said, Mr. Schlossman, we can't discuss specifics of these settlements. As Dr. Paramo noted before closed session, we've done research on whether we are impacted more than other local districts, and we're not, essentially. This is pretty standard. As a public school district, we are required to provide what's called FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education. That $322,000 is the cost of providing this child with a free and appropriate public education. And, there's no one to hold accountable for that, other than to make sure that that child gets everything they need. I don't love that we don't know that these large costs are going to come out of general fund, right? It makes it really unpredictable. But I'm confident that our special education director and the folks she's been working with have negotiated something that's fair for this child. Mr. Becky, I think Mr. Cantwell answered your question. That's always concerning to me too, when we have these big disparities. Working kind of on the business services side of a similarly sized school district, I'll say, unfortunately, when you have to bring in folks in finance and accounting, that's kind of the going rate for people who know what they're doing, especially when you're talking about budgeting with you have to do a specific set of accounts for school districts, and there's a lot of extra reporting. So it's not just kind of any finance or accounting person. It's really specialized knowledge. But I'm really glad that we have someone on full-time. I know Mr. Cantwell is as well. And so that person will take some time to get up to speed, because I believe they're coming from out of state. Is that right? So there are going to be some changes there for this person to really make sure they're ready for for second interim and for next year's budgeting as well. As far as announcements, I just wanted to thank Principal Knoop for inviting me and Dr. Macias over to Burroughs a couple weeks ago. The Gay Men's Chorus of LA performed in an optional assembly for students. It was really, the kids were so excited about it. It was really fun. So thank you, Mr. Knoop, for providing that experience for your students and for me. It was great. Thanks.
Ms. Tabbitt, did you want to? Okay, Dr. Agakanian. Okay. So thanks to everybody who spoke. A couple of quick things. Mr. Becky, one of the things I really appreciate is you holding us accountable. We're at such a precarious moment right now where we're discussing cuts and people's livelihoods are impacted. So you coming up here and really, I love when someone reads the agenda. So you coming up here and saying, explain this is huge because it gives us an opportunity to talk through it, and hopefully it provides a little like clarity or solace for people who are wondering the same thing. So again, it really speaks to the skill with which you hold the role as BTA president, and I want to thank you for always asking these questions because they deserve answers. The only other thing I want to say is, we're going to be having some really good conversations today about changes that we think are really positive and will create more opportunity for people to contribute to discourse. But, if you're looking for something insidious, you're always going to find it. And if you make every decision about yourself, then you're always going to feel personally attacked. The decisions we make as board members, we make as a unit, and we make for what we hope is the greater good of our community, our students, our families, and our staff. So we think a lot about how to create a more welcoming and inclusive space, and you'll hear more about that when we talk about agendas. But I know that most of our community really understands and assumes best intentions when we make decisions and asks, like Mr. Becky, some really great questions from a place of help me understand. And so, the emails we receive do much the same thing, and we're in constant conversation with our community members and greatly appreciate their willingness to engage in respectful dialogue. Okay. Oh, is this retirements here? Sweet, into it. So we're going to do the retirements here. This is fun and new. I like it very much. We have 2 retirements. Yolanda Cornejo, who has been with us since 1999, which is amazing. Thank you so much for your lengthy service. And Cheryl Donovan, who has been with us since 2000. So 2 long-time BUSD employees. So thank you to both of you for the time you've invested in the district. We cannot thank you enough. Before we move on to reports to the board, I also just quickly wanted to wish everyone a meaningful Black History Month. We've already gotten some really great information from schools about the work that everyone's doing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that. So we are going to move on to 11A, our 23-24 LCAP mid-year update.
Good evening, Board President Weisberg, Vice President Agakani, and board members in the Burbank school community. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Dr. Robin Anders, who will do our presentation on the 2023-24 Local Control Accountability Plan, our mid-year update. Dr. Anders.
Good evening. Here to discuss our mid-year update on our plan. This is year 3 of our plan, of our LCAP plan for BUSD. And so that means in year 3, we are set to start a new 3-year cycle starting next year. So this is a culmination of a 3-year plan. I wanted to make sure I address that first. This year has been a unique year in that we've already had quite a few LCAP meetings with our community. And so we've had a meeting in November, a meeting in December, and most recently a meeting in January to discuss our plan. Part of the reasons we've been having these conversations is because the uniqueness of the budget for next year and looking at how we can create a balanced budget, number one, but number two, reallocate some funds to make sure that we're serving the students that need the most services on our campuses. So that's what we're here to discuss tonight. I first want to give a quick mid-year update on where we are with some of our metrics. So part of the LCAP plan is a series of metrics that help us evaluate if we're making progress towards our LCAP goals. And so these are metrics that include academic indicators, socio-emotional indicators. We also monitor our facilities and some of the DEI work that we've been doing. We also look at data from our school satisfaction survey as part of these metrics. And so this is an overall summary of where we are. I do want to point out some of the most significant number of these are to be determined because we still are waiting on the data to be able to evaluate whether or not we've met the metric by the end of the school year. We will have that final data at the end of the year in June when we adopt our new LCAP and move forward with that plan. Also want to point out that most of these metrics, especially when it comes to academic metrics, the baseline was set on data from 2018, 2019, and so that was the year right prior to the pandemic hitting. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of discussion, and a lot of time spent on the topic of learning loss. And so a lot of these metrics, like I said, there is going to be some dips that we've recovered from throughout that pandemic period. So just keep that in mind as we look at this. The appendix does include every individual metric, so if there is any discussion on that, all that data is in there, what we're able to report out on it at this time. But we have met all of our facilities metrics, our personnel services metrics, and we've met 5 of our educational services, 16 of our instructional services metrics. Unmet at this time are 21 of those instructional services and 11 of our educational services. This next slide looks at specifically our goals and is based on our first interim numbers. So what does that mean? First interim just occurred in about November when our budget looks at what we are planning to spend. So these aren't necessarily dollars that we've already spent. This is still a projection on where we're at with spending our budget for this year and where we anticipate we will end the year. And so what I did for this is broke it out by our primary LCAP goals that we spend our supplemental budget in to say what we budgeted and where we are at first interim. And for the most part, we're right on par. A little additional expense with educational services, so we'll monitor that and close out that at the end of the year. You can see down at the bottom we do our totals of our projected expenditures, carryover, projected revenue for the end this year, and then the projected carryover going into next year. So that's just an update really on our budget. Again, in the appendix, I break this out by individual action item and where we are with spending for this year at first interim on each individual action item. The bulk of tonight's conversation is going to be really about what we're looking at as a proposal for our budget in 24-25. And this has been the majority of our meetings so far this year with the community in discussing what our needs are when it comes to the supplemental budget. So this slide is included in this deck because all of the funding we receive that's specific to supplemental, which is for the most part, the entire LCAP budget, is based on our unduplicated pupil count. Question about unduplicated pupil came up during our community meetings, and want to explain that is just a fancy term to describe the students that are included in this group. Unduplicated because you may have a student that meets multiple criteria to be included, but they still only get counted once in our grand total when it comes to funding. So you can see our numbers, and pointing out that our free and reduced meal program as well as our total enrollment is trending downwards. Those are highlighted in yellow, and so that is an indication that the budget could be shrinking a little bit over the next couple of years. So that's something to pay close attention to. These numbers are not our current numbers. These numbers are pulled in October, November, called CBEDS Day, and that's what determines the majority of the funding we receive. So this is a snapshot in time of our enrollment in these areas. The other group that I wanted to point out was that has been helping this budget is our English learners. And so in that, not all the way to the right column, but second to right, you can see that those numbers have been increasing over the last couple of years, and that's actually been helping us to sustain our budget to some degree, that we've seen that increase. There's a couple things that we have to consider when we see those increases. One, more English learners means we have more needs, and we need to be able to provide more services to that population, and that's part of the conversation we've been having. Second is we can't necessarily depend on those numbers to continue to increase to offset our declining enrollment. In fact, what we anticipate is what we've plateaued with a lot of new incoming students that are English learners, and we won't see those same numbers as we go forward. And we lose numbers in these areas because we do a really good job of reclassifying students so they're no longer designated an English learner. So this brings us to the slide of what our overall budget looks like, and these were our budget planning when we started the year. And you can see the numbers looking at really last year and where we started and ended, and looking at this year and where we would be next year. I apologize for that. So they're looking at this year and then projecting where we would be next year. And so that bottom number, the 24-25 projected carryover, the reason it's a negative balance on that is that would be where we would be at the end of next year if we didn't make any adjustments or changes to our LCAP. So with that in mind, we have to look at reducing our budget by a minimum of 1.2 million just so that we can be solvent with our budget. But we've been looking at additional ways to save money, or I should say reallocate money to serve those English learners that we see coming to our schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. John Paramo, who's going to talk us through the next slide, which indicates the areas where we're looking to reduce so that we can have a budget for next year. Yep.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening. I want to keep on this slide for a second and explain to the community that when you look at that figure of $1.2 million, that is the cost, that is the gap we're trying to close in our budget. What that number does not account for is the fact that we have an increase in new immigrants that have come to BUSD. They've come from various countries, and we have seen that increase impact our classrooms at middle school, at elementary school, maybe a little less at the high school because there's more classes and we're able to do more. There's more flexibility in the schedule, but definitely impacting our elementary and our middle school. And so in order for us to provide services for those kids, I need to actually cut the budget more than 1.2 million in order to serve those kids. So what we're really looking at is having to cut the budget closer to 1.6 million. And I want to go over those with the community and talk through them. And I'm going to just take my time with that so that I can give an explanation for each of these. We can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to walk through each of these. There is a rationale under the notes, but I think they need further discussion. The first one is essentially summer school for our EL students. So that's pretty important. We don't want our students to regress during the summer. We want them to keep their English and math skills going through the summer so that when they start back in the fall, they're ready to move forward. That $52,000 is a reduction out of LCAP, but we will be funding that appropriately under ELOP funds. So it's not a service that's going away. It's simply coming out of the LCAP budget. The next item is not something we originally planned to do. And I'm going to be really honest. I spent most of my career at the secondary, specifically at the high school. And being able to offer a robust summer school for both credit recovery and initial credit is very important. But it's really difficult to cut $1.6 million. And anything that's in this plan is going to be very difficult to eliminate. Those are hard choices. If I eliminate this line item, if we do that, we are saving $542,000. I can still provide this service for our families using online platforms that are either for cost or free. There are several platforms. It's not what I really want to do, but I will still be able to serve our kids, give them what they need, and save $500,000 that we can use elsewhere and try to mitigate some of the negative impact that the deficit is causing. So we will be working, we are already working with our secondary administrators, our assistant principals, our counselors. We will provide information early for all our families so that they know how to register their kids for summer school, either credit recovery or initial credit. We'll put a process together. We will give them a list of providers. and they will be able to choose from either no-cost options or for-cost options. PBIS cost, $33,000. We're recommending that we eliminate this from the LCAP plan. There really is no negative impact. This was a contract we had with LA County Office of Education, and it was a contract to help us implement PBIS. We are naturally at the end of that contract, so this would have fallen off anyway. But I wanted to make sure that the public knew that. We did work with our principals very closely over the last several months, and our secondary principals didn't really want to eliminate secondary intervention specialists, but they knew that we had to cut somewhere. And so the secondary intervention specialists will be eliminated. We're talking about 5 specific positions, 1 at each of the middle schools and 1 at each of the high schools. What I will say to the community is that our middle schools all receive Title I dollars, and our middle school principals are able to leverage their Title I dollars if they want to keep their intervention specialists, whether that's full-time or part-time, and that is up to our individual principals, and it's also based on the amount of Title I funding that they have. When it comes to the high school, those are positions that will just be eliminated. That doesn't make me feel good. What I will tell you is that in terms of staffing, the high school has a principal and 4 assistant principals, and so eliminating the high school intervention specialist, we hope, we know is gonna be a hit for them, but we think that they'll be able to close that gap with their administrative staff. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit more about what the intervention specialists do? What are they intervening on?
Sure.
And where do you expect to kind of see the biggest impact of this?
So if you look at the job description and you look at what our intervention specialists are doing, it's really focused on attendance. It's focused on chronic absenteeism and working with those kids. There is also a huge emphasis, particularly at the middle school, for social emotional intervention, working with groups of kids, working with kids that are not fitting in at school and trying to figure out how to intercede so that they can acclimate better and do better. When the kids are acclimated to school better, they perform better and they tend to come to school. And our intervention specialists are very much in tune with that. And I just have to say that all of our intervention specialists are great. But at the middle school, they're the most senior, and they've been doing this for a while, and they do a great job. And so I know that the principals are very anxious to work out their Title I plan that would include retaining them to the extent that they can. The next 2 items are CDS teachers and CDS instructional assistants. What I want to say, and I want to make very clear, is that these are items that are coming off of the LCAP plan. CDS is funded not just out of LCAP, but out of general fund. And we have money in the general fund specifically allocated for CDS. So while we are retracting some of the services or the amount of services because the population has declined, we still have money to provide an appropriate educational environment for CDS. These items are simply coming off of the LCAP plan. The next item is targeted support for at-promise or GATE students. This is completely appropriate for the LCAP plan because oftentimes you could have a student that is gifted, but is also an English language learner. And so this has been on the LCAP plan to be able to supplement materials or resources to assist these students. I am committed to reallocating that $5,000 out of the general fund. It's simply coming out of the LCAP plan. Next items are in reference to our diversity, equity, inclusion items for $10,000 supplementary materials. We weren't spending the full amount on the natural anyway. And it's something that we feel that in light of how much we need to cut, that this is a place that we can do it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, Facing History. This was a contract with Facing History. We've completed the contract. We have completed the professional development with our folks, so this naturally would come off anyway. We had a vision for hiring a consultant for diversity, equity, and inclusion that would focus on mental health, specifically social emotional learning. We wanted to embed that in our plan. We actually had figured out who the consultant would be, and it's not easy, but we're going to cut that in light of our budget situation. DEI site lead collaboration. So this item was funded at $70,000. What I need the community to understand is that on the natural, we weren't using the $70,000. We were only using half. So what we did is we just moved that budget to $35,000. It should satisfy our needs because that's what we spent last year, and this should be fine. And we can reallocate those $35,000 in other places. I know the Board of Education, you know this about me, but I'm an avid reader. I'm reading all the time. I don't watch TV, I read. And having to cut library coordinators is not easy, and it's not what I want to do. I need to explain to the public that we have worked very hard to sustain our current library coordinators for the amount of hours that they already have. I just can't do it. I can't figure out how to do this. We are cutting that $500,000 out of secondary summer school and using that money to reduce how much we need to cut library coordinators. That was originally brought forward as a 50% reduction. We're using the money from that we're saving for not offering secondary summer school to reduce that to only 25%, which is still too much. And I wish we didn't have to do that. But there's no other good place to cut. There's nothing else at the secondary that we can cut. A lot of these expenditures are being cut at secondary. And that money is being reallocated to save some of these things on the elementary side. It's the same thing with elementary response to intervention. Originally, that was coming forward at a 50% reduction. My recommendation is that we cut that only 25%, use some of the money that we are saving from summer school to allocate in that position, and it would be a $125,000 reduction as opposed to $250,000. That was originally funded at $500,000. The last item is peer assistance review. What I would say to you is that in theory, this is a great thing to have as a district, but this peer assistance review is voluntary, and we don't have anybody taking advantage of this service, so it would seem appropriate to me that we cut that back and reallocate that $28,000. Those are the recommendations that I am making to the board as reductions to the LCAP plan. Now, as I stated before I started, is that these are reductions that total more than 1.2. So why? Why 1.2? What are you going to do with the rest of the money? I'll advance to the next slide. Here are areas that we are adding money to the LCAP plan. The first one is to elementary English learner development supports. That $220,000 is the remainder of the savings we had from summer school. That's what we can put towards supports for ELs. We worked out a plan, Dr. Knappik, and he's presented it to principals to be able to provide supports to all 11 elementary schools based on their population size and based on the population size of EL students. I think that this is money that is targeted in the exact right area, as this plan is supposed to be focused on our targeted subgroups, ELs being the major population. Secondary EL supports for classrooms, there's 350,000. Where did we get the 350,000? It's because we cut the secondary intervention specialists, and the savings we had allows me to put this in the LCAP plan to provide for our EL students. What is this for? We already have contractual language in the BTA contract that limits population size to our English language arts classrooms, keeps them lower. What this money would be used for, particularly at the middle school, is to keep those lower population size in the other core academic areas, which are math, science, and social studies. There is an item here for summer school. It's a very low amount in comparison to what it was. It's $26,000. Why are we putting money there? Because I'm still providing summer school. The district is still providing summer school for our special ed students, both extended school year and also credit recovery for our RSP, SDC, special education students that need to recover credit. They're a critical population. We want to make sure that we continue to serve them. And so we have allotted that money to pay for teachers, 2 special ed teachers, plus a TOSA that will oversee the summer school program. I want to tell the public that this is all very painful. And I totally, truly, humbly submit to you that everything that we have put in the LCAP plan in the past has been there for very good reason. And there's not a single item on there that's fluff or shouldn't be there. Sorry. I'll answer any questions.
Well, I just want to thank Dr. Anders and Dr. Paramo. This has been continues to be a lengthy process, and we've had 2 really, I think, successful LCAP meetings thus far, in large part because the feedback that we're getting is that people don't necessarily like us. They don't like these cuts. There's nobody who's into these cuts. But the thing that I've been really happy with, and I know it's been sort of a mandate from the board, is that we are as transparent as we possibly can be. We're communicating with our union partners. We're communicating, I know we've all received over the past couple of months a bunch of emails, and, we read them and we take them into consideration as we do with public comment. But I do want to encourage people to continue the conversation, whether that's through future LCAP meetings or here at the board. But so I think I just wanted to issue a thank you, because I know how heavily this weighs on you as it weighs heavily on us. And I think one of the things to clarify, or maybe to reiterate, because I think you have said this, is that the cuts aren't because we don't value the people who are doing these jobs, or we think that they have not done well in those positions or haven't met a metric. It's not about that at all. And so one of the things that's so horrible is you find that we have put inadvertently our amazing employees in a position of feeling as though they have to defend the work that they've done. And it's not that. We know the vital importance of our library coordinators. We know how important our intervention specialists are. Well, they wouldn't have been there in the first place. Right. We know their value, and it is difficult to both say that and then present cuts, but I do want to reiterate that this isn't because of a deficiency in performance, that this is us really desperately trying to make cuts in a way that affect our students in the least possible way. And saying that knowing that all of these things affect our students. So I just think that's important to reiterate, because I don't want the takeaway to be, well, these positions are being cut because they weren't doing their job. Right. That's not it, which makes it even more painful, but also worth repeating how valuable all of our employees are, and that this isn't a result of performance.
Very well said.
Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
Thank you, President Weisberg. So I appreciate that we're doing some reallocation for our English language learners, because we're seeing that as a need, because that's truly what this process was designed to do, right, is to take care of our special populations for whom we are receiving additional funds. And so in that vein, like, it's hard for me to understand why some of these might have initially been in LCAP, other than it was a place that we essentially had extra funds outside of the general fund. That said, my other kind of question that I've gotten a few times is from parents, specifically about the library coordinators, wondering, is this something that PTA can raise money for, that individual school sites can raise money for? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, we already have at least one elementary school that fundraises for additional library hours, and so that is fine. I wish they didn't have to, but yes, they can do that. And I also want to point out that not all, but some of our elementary schools have Title I dollars, and every year they put a Title I plan together, and they figure out how to best serve their kids, and those schools can leverage their Title I dollars to supplement the hours for library coordinators as well. And because I received about 4 or 5 emails asking very good questions. Is the Hanover Research allocation of $50,000 in the LCAP plan essential? Could that $50,000 be reallocated to library coordinators? I can understand if I was looking at that I might think the same thing. Here is the issue. When we apply for grants, when we submit safety plans to the state, when we send our single plans to the state for student achievement, we need to validate our documents and our data by showing the state that we are seeking feedback and survey data from our community. That is compulsory. And in order to validate our documents and validate what we're doing, and to show that we are that our data is impartial, Hanover Research Group is the one that's providing the survey, sending it out to our community. We're getting that survey back, and we're validating our documents by using that data. So I wish that I could cut that $50,000 and reallocate it back into library coordinators, but that's just not possible. So we are where we are. I'm honestly not looking for a vote. That's why it's a presentation. But in order for me to meet the statutory deadlines for reduction in force, I will have to bring back on February 15th the areas in which we will be reducing staff. And so if the recommendations we're making are not in line with the board, we would want to know that so that we're coming prepared on the 15th with the reductions that really need to happen and take place.
So something that I think has happened, and I just want to make sure continues to happen, is that we're communicating with these community of employees and making sure. I know that you've had meetings with our library coordinators and with our intervention specialists, and so I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations as we move forward and move towards a vote eventually. I know I want to acknowledge that that's already happening. I also think it'll be important moving forward. Dr. Anders mentioned earlier in the presentation about how our EL students, our English learner students, have been a saving grace for us financially. But I also want to make sure, and we've talked about this further on in the presentation, that we continue to talk about the services we're providing with the funds we're allocating, because we don't want to make, and you didn't do this, but the perception shouldn't be we're really lucky to be getting the money from these kiddos, but we're not really worried about because we're providing so many supports, not as much as we wish we could if we had a bunch of money. And I wonder if you could clarify very quickly for people who are watching. I think there have been a lot of questions similar to what Ms. Ponser-Kamkar says, which is why can't you just pay this with this or this with that? And so part of the thing that's hard to explain is restricted funds and how we can't, things we pay out of LCAP and things we pay out of different places, we don't have the freedom. And not as an excuse, but as an explanation of why it is, like to your point, why we can't just use X dollars to bring our library coordinators back up. Trust me, I think we would all do that if we could. And I know that Mr. Cantwell and everybody's been really creative in thinking about how we can reallocate. So could you speak for a little bit about the limitations and how we can use our funds?
Sure. So when we have special block grants, where we have our ELOP funds or LCAP funds, these are all different funding mechanisms. What comes with them are a list of parameters that say this is what this money can be used for, and you need to validate specifically how. So if in Burbank, our targeted subgroups are socioeconomically disadvantaged students, English language learners, foster youth, and homeless. Those are our targeted subgroups. So when we put an item on the LCAP plan, for example, we have to demonstrate to the state how those specific groups are being positively affected by what we're implementing. So if it doesn't fit one of those categories, I cannot use LCAP funds to pay for that item. Obviously, general fund doesn't have as many restrictions, and so it's always a balancing act of what can I legitimately and appropriately pay from these special funding sources, and what has to remain in the general fund, and it gets to be pretty complicated.
So, as a former, we used to call it ELD back in the days. As a former ELD or EL student, I think also what's important to remember is you see this influx because of what's been happening
Around the world.
But I think also another thing I hear commonly, because I went through the experience myself, and it was quite complicated because my parents didn't speak English, and I was learning. What I'm hearing, another reason, is what a wonderful job our teachers and staff are doing in our program. And that's another reason a lot of people are coming and participating in these programs. And I think it is difficult, the cuts are difficult, but at the same time, I can tell you that the stories I'm hearing about how well the students are doing, how less complicated it is. I don't know if you remember, there was a time where people were saying at certain districts that you're just keeping our students in these classes for the purposes of, and Burbank, I've never heard it once, and I keep hearing about how many parents want their students to be here, but also to be part of the program. But it is difficult, and I want to remind everyone again, it's unfortunate we're seeing some of these influxes because of what's happening in the world, but I do want to, give a shout out to all of our teachers and faculty staff. They're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
I agree. I just want to remind the community that it was in September that we had one of our English teachers from Dolores Huerta Middle School come over to the board and speak under public comment about the challenges of her ELD classes and how it's gotten to be so much more complicated because it's no longer the situation where they have Spanish-speaking and Armenian-speaking students only. They have 4, 5, 6 different languages in a single classroom. And we found resources to be able to help at the beginning of the year. We need to specifically allocate those funds in the Title I plan to make sure that it's available and it's ongoing to secure for our teachers that they're going to get supports. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Dr. Paramo.
Thank you.
I think those are the questions. Thank you again. Okay, so we are going to move on to item 12, public hearing, the public disclosure of 2023-2024 negotiated amendment to the agreement between Burbank Unified School District and California School Employees Association. I'm going to read the following. The Board of Education will now hold a public hearing in compliance with provision of AB 1200, AB 2756, GC 3547.5 to allow the public an opportunity to comment regarding the 2023-2024 amendment to the agreement between the Burbank Unified School District and California School Employee Association as presented. We have no virtual speakers, but we have one card for this item. Schlossman? Do I have to open the hearing? Yes, you need to open it. Okay, so I open the hearing. Is that all I have to do? Great. Okay. How long do speakers get? 5 minutes. Okay. I will remind speakers to please stay on topic.
Ms. Weisberg and members, this is a business that we're running here, and I wish that you would separate your emotions. Well, you're laughing. The folks at home can't see it, but you're laughing. But I see you hug your employees. Mr. Ferguson regularly cries, and, I think it clouds your judgment. I really do. My sign here talks about teachers getting 16 weeks off. And let me tell you how I got to that.
This is about CSEA, not
Yes,
teachers. So
it
you
is.
need
It
to,
has to do with salaries.
it needs to be about CSEA, sir, not teachers, classified staff.
Okay. Classified staff has 16 weeks off.
No.
Well, are we talking about 12A or 12B? Because my comments are different for 12B.
This is 12A, not 12B. 12A is classified, 12B is certificated teachers. So you can save your sign for 12B.
Classified to be anybody who's not a teacher.
Right.
Okay. In your discussions, in the documents, there's no mention of the pension contributions. And when you increase salaries, it increases proportionally pension contributions. And that comes out of our general fund. And that needs to be calculated, and I don't see any mention of it. I feel these raises are not sustainable. We have some of the highest paid employees in the nation, not in the area, but in the nation. I think you're depleting our general fund. I think you're shortchanging our kids. And I wonder, how can you spend money into the future with no guarantee of how much money we will have to spend? I think this is fiscally irresponsible. You come to the public and you want money for bonds and for parcel taxes, yet you spend with free abandon without the considerations of the consequences of what you're doing. I wish that you would put down your rubber stamps and discuss these things and the consequences of what you're doing. Because tonight the vote's going to be most likely 4-0 with very little discussion, except to justify and not take into account the types of things that I'm bringing up. I'll be back.
That is the last public comment that we have. So, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you for that. It's the first time I've done public hearings. Do we move to just, thank you so much. Do we move to conversation? No, we don't. Okay, so we're moving on now. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's patience with me. We are going to move on to 12B, which is an amended item. So I will, this is amended a public disclosure in accordance with AB 1200, AB 2756, and the agreement between Burbank Unified School District and the Burbank Association of School Administrators, BASA. I'm going to gavel in the public hearing. The Board of Education will now hold a public hearing in compliance with provision of AB 1200, AB 2756, to allow the public an opportunity to comment regarding the 2023-2024 amendment to the agreement between the Burbank Unified School District and the Burbank Association of School Administrators, BASA, as presented. We have no virtual speaker, but one public speaker, Schlossman.
Just ignore this sign here. Your administrators always want more. I feel that we are being looted from the inside. This agreement goes years into the future. And my comments parallel what I said earlier. How do you know what your income is going to be in the future? Parcel taxes can only be used for construction and maintenance types of things. Parcel taxes are for salaries. And, when you deplete the general fund for salaries, it's troubling. You're posturing to be able to say, we're out of money. When this is a pretty good club to be in. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they have pension contributions too. When you raise their salaries, it raises the pension contributions. And you never talk about that. I mean, what do you do with all the money that you're taking away from the kids? Is it that necessary? I mean, to me, it's greed. And it shortchanges the kids and it shortchanges the opportunities. We heard Dr. Paramo talk about cuts he has to make. But here he is asking for more money for his administrators. They're not going anywhere. This is a great job to have. And if they were to go, some of your administrators, replace them with good people at less money. It can be done. You should try it sometime.
We have one more card. Mr. Dionysian. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too. Good evening, school board. Well, one point that I want to make, having been a product of Burbank Unified, having seen the turnover of school administrators, and having done a Google search on the median income and the salary ranges, I can tell you it is important for Burbank Unified to remain competitive when hiring school administrators. And I'll leave that there. I have one question, however, because I'm a sucker for procedure. If someone from the district can explain why this is two separate reports and two separate public hearings, I'm very curious. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like those are the only two public speakers. So I am going to close the hearing. We are going to, yes, Ms. Tappan.
Yeah, the next.
Yeah. Where am I now? 13. Oh, thank you so much. So we've moved on to 13A, new and or unfinished business. 13A, approval of the 2023-2024 negotiated amendment to the agreement between the Burbank Unified School District and the California School Employee Association, CSEA. Yes.
Madam President, I move that the Board of Education approves the 2023-24 amendment to the agreement between Burbank Unified School District and the California School Employees Association as presented.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Agakanian, seconded by Ms. Ponser Kamkar. All those in favor,
Hang on,
please.
discussion?
Right? Is it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
discussion.
Um,
I do have some.
just to make sure that where did Andy go?
Andy's
He's over
right
there. Hi. Just to make sure I'm reading this right, there are pension contributions included in the AB 1200 to the tune of $561,000.
Yep.
324 of that being from unrestricted funds and 236 being from restricted funds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So yes, if you take the time to read it, it is there. I also want to clarify for those listening at home that there is enormous amount of conversation that goes on between ourselves, our union partners, one another, Mr. Cantwell, Dr. Paramo, and everybody involved to best understand. So while you don't see a lengthy discussion when we vote, there is an enormous amount of work that goes on in the months and months leading up to this vote. So certainly, in-depth conversations and work being done all the time. And I think that's important because often I think people don't understand the procedure and what we do here as a board. But the vote is the very end of the conversation, the very end of the process, not the first. So I think it's just really important
Only
to
for the process to start again for the following year.
Yahoo! I don't know if now is the time to answer Mr. Dionysian's question real quick.
Sure.
I think his question is associated better with the BASA one.
Great, so we'll
and
do
why
it
it's
then.
amended, so we'll do it then.
Great. Any other conversation? Okay, then we will move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with one absence. We are going to, Okay. We are going to move on to 13B, approval of the, and this is also amended? Approval of the 2023-2024 amendment to the agreement between the Burbank Unified School District and the Burbank Association of School Administrators in accordance with AB 1200, AB 2756, and GC 3547.5.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar, seconded by Dr. Agakanian. Any conversation? Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
Can you talk us through the amendments that were made since we talked on Monday, essentially? Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to ask Mr. Cantwell to do that.
Great.
Excellent. So, again, we are grateful for our partnership with CSEA, much-deserved raise that you just offered to them. A reminder also, about 80% of our CSEA positions currently have a starting pay below the minimum wage for food service workers in the state of California, effective on April 1st. And so we are grateful for every one of those employees who are willing to come here when they could be making more money, again, working at McDonald's or any other number of wonderful fast food establishments. This is for the Burbank Association of School Administrators. We initially were going to have a 3.5% raise for all BASA members, so all administrators in this district, excepting the superintendent. He was not putting forward or suggesting a raise for himself, and that was not being recommended to the board. But what the district has historically done is to give the same raise to administrators, to all administrators, as what we give to CSEA and BTA. The feedback that we received this week was real concern that in the same meeting in which we are looking at some really challenging financial decisions for this district, that we'd also be giving raises to some of our highest compensated employees. So direction received at the beginning of this week was to no longer move forward with that full Me Too clause or the full Me Too treatment where we'd give all administrators the same raise that all teachers and classified workers received, but rather to delay any raise for the assistant superintendents within the district as well as the directors on range A for classified and certificated administrators, and delaying that for this entire fiscal year. So whereas the other employees within the district are receiving a raise that is effective on July 1 of 2023, those administrators are just named to not receive a raise this year.
Thank you, Mr. Cantwell. I also just wanted to piggyback on that quickly and say that I appreciate the assistant superintendent's willingness to make this adjustment. We spoke briefly on Tuesday morning about this, and I think everybody understands the complexity of where we are right now. And so I also think this is a great example of public input into this process and the flexibility of our senior administrators to understand the climate and to make adjustments. So I want to thank all of them for their willingness to make this adjustment pretty quickly. And to do so with a real understanding of why it was being asked. So just thanks to everybody for that. Ms. Ponser-Kamkar. Yeah, you can.
Just at a high level, what was the difference in terms of, I was trying to go back and forth between the pre-amended version, but in terms of total cost difference between the original version with everyone getting the raise and the current, do you know?
To be honest, we didn't calculate that, but we can do that for you, and we can share that out with you and the public.
Okay, great, thank you.
Dr. Agakanian.
Thank you. And again, thank you. And but also, I want to also, those of you know me, I'm pretty frugal, and I'm very good with budgets. I also oversee over 80 employees at my work. And I think one of our speakers said it best, you want to be competitive. Because what's the reality out there right now, and things people don't talk about is cost of living, for example. People forget that these salary raises, not even coming close to what the cost of living is in today's, markets. It's not only California. And you've seen the oil, gas prices dropping, rent is going down a little, but food is going up, right? So I think when you take into consideration and how competitive this is, I'd rather keep the talent than have talent jump every 2-3 years from position to position because someone pays more. Because in this business, this is not about profit. We're in a public sector, we're here for our kids. We're a nonprofit institution. And I've seen what the team does. And I thought I was good in negotiating. But I can tell you that we have some of the best negotiators in the state of California. We're pinching every penny. But ultimately, at least for me personally, you can't put a price on a good education. Because these are the individuals who one day will be sitting at these positions running what we call a public education system. I want to remind people with emphasis on the word public. So is it difficult? Yes. Will we get through it? Yes. But again, I can tell you right now, just at my workplace, what changes we've gone through because there is a lack of talent. It's the same thing that applies to Fortune 500 companies. Look at their CEOs and now they're jumping from position to position. No one talks about that, right? But everyone talks about public education. So I think we should take all of that into consideration. So I do want to thank the team for all their hard work and the amount of time they put in. These negotiations are not easy, they're lengthy. But at the end of the day, it's about our children. And it's difficult sometimes to lay off these teachers. But at the same time, I would rather stay competitive, keep the talent around, than going around and looking for new talent. There is a big shortage right now. Just go look for some of these positions. And yes, our teachers and administrators are not fairly paid. And people should take into consideration that it's not only about the money, it's also about things like cost of living. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agakanian. If there's no more conversation, we'll move to the vote. Did we have a motion in a second? We did. Yes, you did.
We're doing the so move second.
You really moved
Thank
it.
Thank you for bringing that back and reminding me.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0 and 1 absent. Move on to 13C, approval of agreement for professional services with AMS.net. May I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar, seconded by Dr. Agakanian. Any conversation? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. 13D, format changes to the Board of Education meeting agenda. May I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar, seconded by Dr. Agakanian. Yes, there's going to be a conversation. So I want to provide a little bit of context as we get started. One of the things that we've been talking about as a collective board is a way to make the meetings more accessible to the public and allow them more opportunity, or perhaps an easier opportunity to participate. So one of the things that came up in the conversation that I want to talk about first, because it's not going to be part of this tonight, is a conversation about shifting our board meeting earlier. And the reason I don't want to include this in whatever we vote on tonight is because it's really important, I think, that we reach out to the community first. So I've asked Dr. Paramo if we can send out a survey to community members within BUSD and ask them if moving to 6 p.m. is going to benefit them, because I would hate to make a shift and then have it exclude parents as opposed to include more parents from participating. So it'll be for like a relatively short period of time. Then we can bring that back and talk about it as a board, but it feels important that we don't make that decision in a bubble, that we in fact involve our community, not just our families, but our teachers and staff as well.
I was going to say,
Oh, everybody.
can we send it to?
Everybody. the world. Well, yeah, because the last thing we want is to make these changes and then find out that they negatively impact people participating. It's supposed to be the opposite. So,
It's a good idea.
yeah. So I want to talk about the changes that I do think are realistic to discuss tonight. So there are a couple of things that I'd like to propose. The first of which is adding to the beginning and if people have an agenda, they can check it out. When we do reports at the beginning of the board meeting, so if you look to where our student reports normally are, I have to find them. Number 9, reports from the board. I'd like to add in I'd like to suggest that we include a couple of things. That we add a standing item that is for our BTA and CSEA presidents to report out if there is something that they want to speak to. I think it's really important that we provide our union partners that opportunity and that they know that there's a dedicated place for them. So that can either be sharing news, asking questions, whatever it might be. The other things I would like to add back is a board report, because right now what the board does is not only are we responding to public comment, but then we're also like, and then I went to a musical, and it feels relatively disjointed. So the board report being added back in will allow us to talk about the things we've done in the community, and then when we respond to public comment, it is just about public comment, which feels more appropriate and perhaps respectful to people who have just spoken. The last thing I would like to do is add, and in this order, is add a superintendent report where Dr. Paramo can speak to things that are going on in the district. I think this is going to be really important and informative and allow the community to learn in a deeper way what's going on. So that's the first thing I'd like to suggest. I don't know if you want, and there's only one other big thing I want to suggest, but let's talk about this one first.
Let's hear the big thing.
How
before.
is so 10B is superintendent's comments, in response to public
Yeah,
comment.
I think it's
So you
important for
just
us to
wanna-
separate out
Yeah.
our response to public comment and our sharing of information, both as a way to respect the public comments themselves and also to create a little bit of a distance. So that's the first.
What's the big thing you want to say before I make my comment?
Okay, so we've done a lot of looking around. One of the things in conversation with Mr. Cantwell and Dr. Paramo we've talked about is we don't know the last time we have sort of modernized and or updated the agenda structure. And one of the things that we have found over the past couple of years is people who come to speak, if you're speaking in that second public comment period, you are often waiting 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. And even though we've given priority to our students or our teachers or whatever, it's still a really long time, and people leave without being able to speak, which I think is hugely disappointing. We don't want someone who's come here to speak to leave without having engaged. So I don't want to adjust the amount of time that people are given, although we are about 3 minutes longer than literally every other school board, as far as I can tell, in the United States, and every other city council. So I'm not interested in reducing the time, but what I would like to suggest is a permanent conflation of our first public comment period and our second. Because in doing an observation, and I went back and looked at public comment over the past 2 years, and it is almost never utilized because of how late it falls. So this is an attempt to give people the opportunity. So I think the way we talked about it is to have agenda-specific items go first, and then to have anything within the jurisdiction of the board follow that. Still a 5-minute public comment period. People can still speak before closed session if they choose. It just gives people the opportunity to speak at an hour that I think probably works better for people and allows more collaboration. So I know Dr. Agakani and then Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
So I can tell you my wife will vote on 6 o'clock to start.
She can do the survey.
I think it is important also where we're putting some of these items. I'll be honest with you, like us giving reports of what we did during the week can go all the way to the end, right? I think what's important for me, at least personally, is to listen to the public, listen to our students, you know. And I think at one point before, if you remember, Ms. Tabbitt, we used to include what we did and kind of respond at the same time, but it was mostly about what we did during the week. then it did get confusing. It's all kind of awkward because, yes, I do want to tell people how my week went, but at the same time, I'm also interested in listening to, what people have to, talk about, especially now that, we're dealing with some difficult things like budget cuts and all the other items. It is important for us as elected officials to listen to the voters, listen to the public. And I think that's important for me. So I think shifting it where, people will be there to listen. I'm sure, a lot of people are disappointed sometimes because they have to leave early because they have families and whatever the reasons are. And I know it's difficult. And, someone earlier said sometimes you look at your phone. I can tell you, for someone like me who has a working family, my wife works very interesting hours. She's a pharmacist, so it's not like we have a babysitter or not, and then dealing with my family, right? It's difficult. I have a mother now that's by herself. So sometimes you've seen me in the past walk out because something had happened. Unfortunately, it was my father. And, we all have lives and we all have families. But I think it's also important that we respect individuals who come here, sit here, and wait because they could be with their family. We should respect their time. So I think when we're structuring this, I think it's important. I like the ideas, but I want to make sure that public and our students go first. And our students should go first. And sometimes you've seen, I don't know if they know, some of them don't know, they don't have to stick around during the whole, no, some other boards, they've told early on, once you give your report, you can go home and attend your homework, whatever it is. I think that's also important to let them know, because I had instances where I can go home, I'm like, yeah, you can
You
go
mean
home.
our student reps?
Yes,
Sure.
you know,
The sponsor campaign.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arkani.
Yeah, I think in line with Dr. Agakanian's comments, what we could do is essentially continue to have public comment all the way at the top.
Sure.
Space for responses to that, and then these kind of student reports, superintendent reports, board member reports. Because I think we had been talking about doing it the reverse way, right? Which was like having student, superintendent, board reports, and then public comment. But to Dr. Agakanian's point,
That's fine.
we may still end up with 45 minutes of that before we get to public comment, and I'd like to get to that sooner rather than later, and then
love
folks
that idea.
can listen to
Great.
can listen to public comment or can listen to the responses, and then if they want to be free, they can be free. I'm curious in terms of, so would we continue to use the blue card, white card system? Could someone submit 2 cards for one comment period, like a blue card and a white card? How would that work?
So my understanding is, and experts, please correct me if I'm wrong. We would have to indicate whether it was an agenda item or general, like within the jurisdiction of the board. 1 card per person. And again, if someone wants to come speak before closed, and I also want to bring up, email, call us, meet with us. And additionally, we don't have the call-in, but we still have Zoom public comment, which is something the city doesn't have. And so that I think is comparable to being able to call in. A Zoom is essentially, and you don't have to turn a camera on if you don't want to. Many people don't. So we do also have that option. And so we would work with Ms. Quiterio to make sure that these changes were publicized, that whatever changes to the card we make, and I'm going to defer because I'm sure that you have a much better idea of what's going to be effective, and that we would not, we've already talked about, like, if we do make these changes, posting something by the comment cards, putting it on the website when people maybe go in to find out what the agenda is, and doing our best to really communicate to people what these changes are. Because, I mean, I think in general, people will be happy no one's going to be like, wait, I wanted to speak 3 hours from now. They'll probably be happy that they're speaking early. But I do think that your suggestion of having public comment earlier really speaks to the intention behind this, which is to involve more people, not fewer. So that's I appreciate that. So we'll figure out if it's 1 or 2 colored cards, but 1 per person.
Didn't you say there would be one opportunity for the public to speak? The first group would be folks who want to speak about a specific agenda item.
Yes.
And the second time period in that
In that 1 round.
would be about anything within our purview.
Correct.
So just not to be argumentative, but it would be, I'm telling you as board president, it'd be really nice to have them in 2 colors.
Sure.
So you knew the blues go first and
I am,
and white. so
yeah, I'm
whatever.
absolutely fine with
So-
whatever. I just also want to defer to Ms.
And it would
Quiteria to
help
make
people
sure.
who have to turn them in. too.
Absolutely.
to
I think
know.
we can talk about the sort
Yeah.
of, but I
I
you're,
thought we were.
you're-
That's why I was bringing it up.
no, I think it's you come in and it's a great point.
Well, okay.
All right, good talk. Yeah.
Can we also add a coffee break for?
No,
5 minutes?
stop.
I was just kidding.
So I just want to reiterate where we are so far, which is, it sounds like what we're saying is to move public comment and then responses before, to move the reports after that. The only question I have about that is, should we not keep student reports, can we keep student reports earlier in case they have to leave? Because public comment can often be the lengthiest part of the meeting. Is there anything that prevents us from having student reports and then having the other reports? Okay, so I would like to suggest that we at least keep student reports, because if they have to go, they have to go.
Yeah. And then maybe so reports like, the LCAP and all that we just had are very important after,
Yeah.
just start the official, that's not true. Okay, yeah, after public comment. But the special, what do we call them?
Recognitions.
Special
and
recognitions and
presentations.
presentations should always be at the beginning.
Yes,
So I don't think.
yes.
Because usually they're part of
It comes,
under reports, yes?
yeah.
Usually
Okay.
before,
They should be,
I feel like
because
they're usually at the top.
that's usually
They are.
why, everybody.
But I also like the format because once the students should go first, of course, and then the record, and then we have comments, and then maybe when we do reports, the second period when you can talk about, someone might have read a report, but you explained it differently. They might have questions coming back second period, where anyone can talk about the items, right?
What we're proposing is one period of public comment.
One period.
Well, technically two if you want to come speak before closed session. So, and then it's
Oh, okay.
structured with agenda items first and then non-agenda items within the jurisdiction of the board.
That's good.
But I think that the order that everyone's suggesting makes a lot of sense. So
We're still gonna do 5 minutes though, right?
5 minutes, we're not reducing the amount of time.
5 minutes for both kinds.
Yes, 5 minutes. So that's actually an extension for people because previously within the jurisdiction was only 3 minutes. So,
We can give a special award for people who stay under 3. No, I'm just kidding.
yes,
Well,
candy.
no, but I have to, but she's right also. A lot of districts do 2
Oh my, or one.
or 1.
I mean, when I talk to people about how long, people are like, I'm sorry, what? 5 minutes? But it seems to be a tradition that works, and I certainly don't want to. The goal here is to create participation. I don't want the sense to be we're trying to limit, and I think this is actually going to increase the number of people who come and participate. That's my hope.
And there's many boards that don't respond to public comment either. They say
It's true.
their
Thank you.
spot, and
Thank you.
the superintendent or a director or somebody responds and answers the question, and we just would sit here,
Look pretty.
Yeah.
Ms. Sponsor Campcar.
So I would like to go back to this. So I would like to make sure that if we're going to continue with the Zoom option, that it's a little bit easier for folks to access.
Yes.
I think it's hard for me to tell because people will say like, I couldn't find the Zoom, but also will say like, we didn't get an email from them
Right.
or whatever. So
Right.
I'd like to make sure that that's easier to access. I'm also curious, have we looked into what the city does with phones? I imagine that then we would need someone to like man the phones, which
That's the problem is they have
upsetting.
a staff person that is their entire sort of focus, and we just don't have. We don't. I mean,
Okay, just making sure. I
It's a great-
assumed that was it was not like a cost for the
No.
telephone itself. It was fully someone to manage the queue.
right, because there's like they do a similar thing to our Zoom, which is like you have to do it by this time and you have to sign up, and so I believe so. You can't. I don't believe you
I
can
think
just
you can call in during the meeting.
You can
Maybe.
actually.
Yeah.
But they have a committed staff. They also have a committed team with the media and the whole thing. I wish we did.
Well, I just wonder if there are ways to expand access to the Zoom without making it totally susceptible to nefarious activities. But we can noodle on that one a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think calling.
I mean, for me, the most important thing is that in some capacity we retain an option where someone can comment and they don't have to be in the physical space. So whatever that ends up being, I'm okay with it, but we don't want, I mean, post-COVID, that's the reality now. We want to make sure that people have access, even if they don't have transportation or they're calling on their lunch break or dinner break or whatever it is. Yeah,
I just have another suggestion.
Love it.
Agenda-wise.
I love it.
So I noticed last meeting we did not have a gift report. I'm also curious if we can adjust the format of the gift report to, often it becomes kind of like I'm going to rattle off all the names and all the numbers. And so what I was thinking is, could we consolidate among similar gifts? So we could say this person, this person, this person, this person all contributed to outdoor science school, and maybe not including individual gift amounts unless they are over a certain threshold, $1,000, whatever it is. I think it makes the recognition a little more authentic than just rattling off a number of agenda. No matter how enthusiastically we try to do it, it is the last item of our meeting. And so I'd like to make sure that we're recognizing it appropriately.
What I like about that, because I see the trepidation, is that we talk about how every gift, no matter how big or how small, really matters. And so not attaching a monetary value to it, I think is really lovely to be able to say thank you to X, Y, and Z for their donation at Providencia Elementary. I'm sure he does. And I will say that I do not think that people donate to Burbank Unified to be read in the gift report at the end of a board meeting. Hold on. I think to Ms. Ponser Kamkar's, if it is like the Chuck Lorre Foundation, obviously, I mean, that was, I think, a separate thing. So when we have like a large foundation or organization, of course it's gonna be a separate conversation, but there is something I think equitable and nice about thanking the person or the organization for their contribution. I don't think that the amount is necessary.
So, I understand your point, but I will just use an example. One of the largest recorded donation to an educational institution in California started with $10. And that person was recognized on the 10. And that eventually, over the years, became the single largest donation to that education. So I think when you pick and choosing, also depending on amount, it complicates it. I think we should recognize the people and the amounts, because to some people, I know everyone is giving out of their goodness of their heart, but sometimes it also encourages their friends and neighbors to match that amount. So if I heard Armand gave $20 on public television, I'm gonna go back and match that. And I think that's important that people hear that publicly. So I don't think we should complicate it, maybe putting them in groups, but and I'm still waiting to see when we're gonna acknowledge some of these donors with certificates of recognition. Thank you.
I believe that we said that was going to be the responsibility of the vice president to organize that. So we're waiting on you, sir. Ms. Tabbitt.
I better say this fast then. Mr. Cantwell, is there any kind of legal or IRS sort of law that says we need to publicly comment on the donations that come to us? I know we recognize them with the letter, which is...
It is a wonderful tradition of Burbank Unified. It is not a common practice, and there's no legal requirement that it be read into the record.
Okay. Did you hear what he said? I like that. It's a lovely Burbank practice.
Yes. Mr. Cantwell often says that when we're looking at agendas. It's a lovely Burbank practice.
He only started the lovely after he shaved his mustache.
That's right. That's right. Saucier.
That was an accident.
Yeah. Okay, so any other conversation? I do also want to include staff very briefly, lengthily is not a word. If there are changes that we're suggesting that you think would be detrimental, that are not a Brown Act compliant. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I just want to make sure before we move forward that we've asked you as well.
I personally like the suggestions you're making. I think it would streamline things and it organizes it for me in a better way. The only suggestion I might have is when we are allowing opportunities for reports to the board from BTA, CSEA. Although BOSS is not an official union, we might want to include them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was an oversight. I'm really glad you brought that up. Ms.
No worries.
Ponser Campcar.
The last thing I'll say on the time change, and I know we're gonna get a survey and make a decision a little bit later, is just thinking about when we then do closed session, whether we're doing closed session before or after. It makes it, if we do it after, then we can't really approve things on consent agenda. My guess is that they have to come back the following meeting. At the same time, we're not always using the full hour prior to the meeting. And so I wonder if doing them after might be more time efficient.
Ms. Tabbitt.
Well, back in the day, in lovely Burbank, no, we did start our meetings at 6, and we had closed sessions prior at 5, and I didn't ever, I mean, we had a fairly full house most of the time, and definitely people who stayed to the end of the meeting.
Which would be lovely.
Yeah, which would be lovely. And I know, I'm really, part of what I do is because of my love for kids and making sure that as adults, we do the best we can for them, because
Yes.
they obviously don't always have choices. They're
Right.
here because their parents decided to buy a home here.
Right.
And this is where you're going to school. So I think it's our responsibility then to do the best we can for those.
Yes.
However, I also like to take into consideration our staff who started work at 8:30 or earlier, depending on the person that you are. Mr. Dr. Knappich, yes, I know how early you get here. And you're probably the first or second person in the door. First, he's the first. Okay. And I appreciate that, and thank you for the extra time you put in that you are not paid for, but I know because you have the similar heart, so you want to make sure things get done right. That's a long day,
Yeah.
is what I was trying to say.
Oh, I
When
know.
I got caught up in Dr. Knappich.
Who doesn't though, you know?
I know, he's just Dr.
That's,
Knappich. He's the
I
best.
agree. And so I think what
So-
will be, oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. You're right. I can stop now.
I think when we get the results back from the survey, it will be super instructive. We can revisit that, and at that time, we can also talk about when we want to place closed session, because who knows what it's going to say. But again, I do think it is really important that the community lets us know, because why would we make changes to make it more inclusive if no one wants us to change that specific thing? So that will come back. But I want to, so we've had a motion and a second. Let me just reiterate.
I was just thinking, remembering of someone else who was around a while ago. I think we also agendized a closed session for the end if we needed it.
Sure.
So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
too.
So we'll revisit that when we revisit the time. No, it's okay. That's why it's conversation. Okay, so just to quickly reiterate the changes, we're going to be adding in BTA, CSEA, and BASA report. We're going to be putting in board report and superintendent report. We will be condensing public comment into one period with agenda items first for 5 minutes, non-agenda items within the jurisdiction of the board for 5 minutes. We will place public comment ahead of all of the reports except for student board reports. Am I missing anything?
Putting a cap on board member comments, 5 minutes? No, just being true.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we?
I'm happy to put a timer on.
All right, so let's take a vote. Am I missing anything, Dr. Promo? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. I'm excited to see how this goes. Thanks, everybody. Moving on to item 13E, structural changes to the governance committee meetings. May I have a motion and a second? Moved by Dr. Agakanian, seconded by Ms. Ponser Kamkar. Conversation. Just figure it out. So I know Dr. Paramo is going to chime in as well, but one of the conversations so for people who are sort of not up to, who aren't following our governance committees, Mr. Ferguson had put forward a really interesting idea, I don't remember how long ago, which was the goal was to, Wow. Wow. Time flies when things are difficult. To streamline and hopefully make our governance committees more effective. So what we ended up doing is keeping the ones that are legally required as is, and then sort of condensing into 3 larger governance bodies that don't vote or make policy, but talk about specific items, which would then better inform board members in when we were voting or considering issues. And what became apparent over the past year, which is why you try things and also remain open to changing them, is that this model was not effective in the way that we thought it would be. And, appreciation to Mr. Ferguson for being open to the realization that this didn't go the way that we thought it would. And I think it speaks volumes that we tried something and we're acknowledging not only did it put a hugely undue burden on our staff, but it wasn't creating the kind of conversation that we had hoped to achieve. And we don't want to take people's time unless it's going to be effectively used. So what I would like to suggest, and this has been a conversation with input from everybody who chaired these committees, and Dr. Paramo and Dr. Knapik and Mr. Cantwell and Ms. Cuseo when she was still helping with this, is to disband these, which have already essentially been paused, and to obviously keep our required and then create ad hoc committees. So when we have major issues that we want to bring forward, such as student mental health, or maybe it's school safety or whatever it is, to convene ad hoc committees to have the conversation about that specific issue. And when that specific issue has been resolved, to then dissolve the ad hoc committee. And so I think that the ad hoc committees will be brought forward by board members when they see fit. We can talk about it as a group if we, it's something that I would, like to put forward that I already have, is to create a mental health and wellness ad hoc committee. So to me, it feels like a better use of time. It's a more focused use of time, and it allows us to dive more deeply into these specific issues. So that's my thought based on the past year, but obviously want to open it up to conversation. Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
So having sat on 2 of the governance committees, I'll say that I really appreciate the presentations that staff did.
Yes.
I wasn't sure that they were getting the kind of feedback or that we were getting the kind of participation that would have moved any of that further. That said, I would say that like our admin affairs doing the work with Perkins Eastman on the facilities master plan was an example of how these ad hoc committees essentially should be working in the future, right? And so, that group really engaged on a very specific targeted thing to give feedback and to work with the consultants on it. And so I like this idea a lot. That's it.
Second.
Ms. Tabbitt?
I went along with this idea because I wanted to see what it looked like. And,
Sure.
And there were some good parts to it, but yes, there was a lot of work on staff, and I don't know that you're right, the end result for all their hard work, they just came to a board meeting and presented
And
the same
redid
thing.
what, yeah.
Yeah, where, as you said earlier, you should read your agenda, and if you have questions, make a phone call and say, what's happening here? That's part of our job to
Right.
do, I believe. There were some committees prior to the governance committees, thank you, that I think were important.
Yes.
My favorite was the Facilities and Technology Committee. It kept 2 board members at least up to date on both of those things, which are vital to the day-to-day operations of and welfare of our population, students and staff both. And so something we should think about bringing back. Especially if, a facilities bond goes through.
Right.
That was a great place for ideas and presentations to be brought forth. And it really kept the board in tune and involved with what was going, at least two board members, radically, but then, supposed to share information or whatever as things are not voted on.
Madam,
Well, hold
Wouldn't
on.
that be bond oversight committee though? Like if we.
No, it's totally different,
totally different.
totally different.
But should it be totally
Totally
different?
different.
That's the question
Well,
I'm asking.
that's my argument. It
Yeah.
seemed to, there were things we talked about in there. For example, like when we had roofing issues, and where does that lead us? We spend a great deal of money out of the, general fund. So shouldn't you have board members who understand and know about that? I mean, technology and, places they wanted to go and things they wanted to do, how they were spending our dollars each, all the time, which is something we oversee. I think it's very good to have at least we can only have two board members.
Right.
Really have an in-depth knowledge of that.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts.
Thank you.
I love the earlier comments from my colleague talking about we're having meetings about meetings, right? And I used to, people that don't know me know that I'm a complex system person. I don't like to have meetings. I don't also like to have board meetings when it comes to committees, just to have meetings, something that's going to be presented later on anyways. I do want us to revisit this. As far as I'm concerned, it'd be great if we can get feedback from each board member, suggesting what we think will work best. Because I can tell you also, when you commit to this board committees sometimes, also you want to be there, but if it's not effective, it's also our time, right? And we have to be very respectful to our time, your time. So I think if we can put forward suggestions from the rest of the board members of thinking which committees will work, and ad hocs, I love the ad hoc committees, of course, but which basic ones are you talking about when you talk about?
So what I referenced in the beginning are the legally required committees that we have to have. And we need to go back and revisit that as well, and we waited because of this. So they are,
We have to have a budget, some sort of
a budget
budget
committee.
committee. That is definitely required. If we have a bond, then we have to have the Facilities Oversight Committee.
Right.
So those are compulsory.
DLAC and ELAC.
DLAC,
committee.
ELAC.
Yeah.
those-
Calendar. So I think we need to bring that back to like revisit who's actually assigned to them. So my suggestion would be to officially dissolve. Also make sure, I know we've given a heads up to people on those committees, but make sure that we follow up whatever we decide tonight and tell everybody what's going on and why. And then we move forward with the establishment of ad hoc committees. The question I have is, when we are creating ad hoc committees, do we need, what kind of vote needs to happen? What kind of board approval needs to happen? Because I think we don't want to run into a situation where we're all creating like 72 ad hoc committees. We want to keep it really focused and so I don't quite know that process. So I'd like to refer to some of the experts and talk about like, would we need a vote? What do we think is the best way to proceed if this is how we choose?
So, to your earlier point, yes, I think that what we should do is send official letters to all the members that were serving on the governance committees to let them know where we are and to let them know that we would have an establishment of some ad hoc committees so that they're fully informed because they gave up their time and they were official members, and to dissolve officially, we should officially send a letter. In terms of ad hoc committees, I think that there are the established ones that we just spoke about a minute ago, that we should establish again, because they're required, and at a later time, board members can select which ones they want to serve on and be part of. In terms of new ad hoc committees, I think that those come up naturally. For example, a year or so ago, the board asked for a superintendent's committee to look at fundraising, and that made sense. And that was in place for about a year. And we got focused on a few areas and resolved a few things. And then the ad hoc committee dissolved. So I think those things will come up. What I know that we've been talking about is to form an ad hoc committee on mental health. I think that's great. So that's the one that's come up. We can establish that. We can establish board members. And I think that we will determine together when that comes to a natural end.
I think, and help me out here. There used to be, or there is still, just we haven't utilized them. There's superintendent committees.
Yeah.
And then there's board pushed committees, and they have different requirements. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Absolutely, that's a great distinction. So a superintendent committee, which the environmental advisory committee is one example of, is not required to be compliant with the Brown Act, whereas an officially created board committee is required to be. And one of the important distinctions there is that you can't actually do remote meetings anymore if it's a Brown Act compliant committee. And so that means that, again, we don't have the flexibility to have full participation from potential committee members who might want to join by Zoom but not able to join in person if it's subject to the Brown Act. They can join in remotely, but they actually have to provide their address. They have to post an agenda at the residence or wherever they may be joining. There's a couple nuanced exclusions to Brown Act requirements, and one of them is an ad hoc committee. If an ad hoc committee is created by the board, which it can be board action that creates it, for a specific purpose for a limited duration, that does not have to follow the Brown Act. Otherwise, any board-created committee, whether it has jurisdiction to make policy or only a recommending body, those are both situations where it's a Brown Act committee.
So, and I appreciate you brought that up, because I almost lost a third of my board members because now they have to meet in person.
Yeah.
But it worked out. So I think we should have the basic committees and then ad hocs as come, because with ad hocs, we don't have to follow the Brown Act. And I think ad hocs should also operate as, do they need a vote? Not really. I mean, what we do is we make recommendations. So under governance, for example, we'll have an ad hoc committee for nomination of new board members. They make a recommendation, but that governance committee is the one that ultimately goes and gives the news. And it makes it easier because it won't require votes. It's just recommendations.
Yeah, the goal is not for these ad hoc committees to make policy, but rather to inform policy being crafted by staff and board. So
recommend
or
policy?
recommendations, great. It's not going to be a governing body. It's not going to be a policy creating body. It's going to be advisory in capacity.
Recommendations, we don't have to
Yeah.
take it.
Yes.
So going back, though, to Board Member Tabbitt's suggestion of bringing back a Facilities and Technology Committee, that would only work if it was a superintendent-driven committee. Otherwise, it would not qualify as an ad hoc committee.
Right.
Unless you said, this is a ad hoc committee
Right,
for
and
the
it was-
Facilities Master
And it
Plan.
was a superintendent.
Okay,
Is that the one that met in the morning?
Yes. Yeah.
okay. Just wanted to
9
make
a.m.,
sure I
not
was
the
clear.
7 a.m., that's SFOC.
Okay, so to clarify, so we know what we're voting on, we are going to be disbanding the governance committees, and we are going to be creating ad hoc committees as needed, and we will at some point revisit, and I would like to, I mean, we missed the future agenda items, but I'll bring it up next board meeting, but we should bring back the legally required committees and make sure people are assigned. So essentially what we're voting on tonight is dissolving the governance committees as is and establishing as needed ad hoc committees. We have a motion and a second already.
Point of
Yes.
clarification. So we're dissolving, but
Yes.
are we keeping basic committees and then ad hocs as needed under those committees, or just ad hocs period?
Ad hoc and then the legally required committees that we've always had
legally, okay.
and have continued on in addition, so.
Thank you for
And or any
clarification.
committees we choose to have.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, any other conversation? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. I appreciate the really constructive conversation from everybody this evening.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to item 13F, ratification of professional services, Forma Engineering and Contracting Incorporated.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar, seconded by Ms. Tabbitt. Any conversation? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 4-0. We're going to move on to 14, the consent agenda. This is 14A through 14P and 14R through 14S and 14Q as amended. Does any? Good. Moved by Ms. Ponser Kamkar, seconded by Dr. Agakanian.
And may I just say, well done.
Well, let's be real. Cindy Q wrote it down for me. This
What would we do without
glorious post-it note saved my life, because otherwise it would have been me furiously flipping through the agenda. So thank you, Ms. Quiterio. So moved by Ms. Ponser Kamkar, I believe seconded by Ms. Tabbitt. All those in,
No, I seconded.
oh, Dr. Agakanian. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. So we have, hold on, we are going to move to item 15, request to address the board. 15A, we do have speakers. So any individual or group representative present this evening may address the Board of Education on any subject within the jurisdiction of the school board by completing a blue request card and turning it in to Ms. Quinterio. Speakers are requested to state their name prior to speaking to the board. Not more than 3 minutes may be allotted to each speaker, except by unanimous consent of the Board of Education. The first card we have this evening is Schlossman.
You crack me up. You made specific changes on public comment without giving the public the opportunity to comment. Crazy. Really, is that how it works? Is that how it works? You can make changes like that and eliminate public comment on the changes? It's all wrong. You need to bring this back on a future agenda so people can talk about these changes you're proposing. And you have funny math, Miss Weisberg. 5 + 3 is 8, and you're telling me it's better now with 5? I mean, you're taking away 3 minutes of public comment. Get your head on straight. Give people an opportunity to comment on this. And none of you say anything about it. This type of thing, you should be encouraging public comment. I want to hear what people have to say, even if I disagree with them. And folks like me who criticize you, you need to pay attention. If you surround yourself with yes people like you do, it's to your detriment. Look what happened to Prince and Michael Jackson and all these people who said, yes, you're the greatest, do what you want. It doesn't have a happy ending. By your own admission, Ms. Weisberg, you're cheating. You're a cheater. You're violating the Brown Act. Because when you say you talk about school business before the meeting with each other, that's a violation. Speak up, administration. It infuriates me. And you make fun of me. PK says, oh, you know, she made fun of me for knowing about the Brown Act. If you talk, you did. Ms. Weisberg, if you talk to Agakanian, and Agakanian talks to PK, and PK talks about the same subject, that's a serial meeting, and you're violating the Brown Act, and you admitted to doing it. Well, that's what I heard. You said you talk about this among yourself. Okay. We need a code of conduct here, similar to what the city just did. Why wait until something goes wrong? Take their code of conduct, modify it so it suits the board better, and do it. I talked earlier about the merit award program. You know, I want you to reward employees who save us money and do things better. I want a way to report malfeasance anonymously, because I think there's some stuff that we could improve on. And I want a question to my answer. If nobody knows it, just say we don't know. How many meetings can one of you miss before it's a violation of your office? I mean, is it a fair question? Can Ferguson miss next meeting too?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker is Clint Howard, followed by Catherine Howard. And our last speaker that I have is Nicole Drebecki.
Good evening, Board. My wife and I are residents of Burbank, and we have a child that goes to Dolores Warrior Middle School. And we are honestly very frustrated because we're horrified by the school violence. We're talking about middle school. The school violence and the way it is handled by administrators and teachers, or the way it's not handled. There are a couple examples that I'll bring up. First of all, fighting. Now, I went to when it was Jordan Junior High, and yes, there were a few fights, but there seems to be fighting regularly. And another thing that is part of our society's trouble is now, all the kids have cameras because they have phones, and these phones are recording these fights, and they have afterlife. And we find it very frustrating. And our daughter has been involved in not the fighting so much. In one instance, earlier in the year, she was wrongly looped into a situation by administrators where she was accused of bullying. We were called. It was apparently was a really serious problem. Your daughter was bullying and making bodily harm threats. Well, with just a little bit of investigating, it was determined by those administrators that our daughter wasn't even there. And then we went in to talk to them, and I swear to goodness, they did not want to rescind the punishment that they had dished out thinking that she was a bully. Now, we got that straightened out. So we were sort of put on alert. There was one other incident, and there was more than one, but at a family fun night or karaoke night or something, our daughter was struck by a fellow student, and there were witnesses. And that student was in front of an administrator, and that administrator, in our presence, told that child to run home because we had called the police. And I don't want to get into what the police said. That's a frustrating thing, but you're not the police, you're the school board. It has just been very frustrating for us, and boy, we were expecting a nice, easy sort of run our child through Dolores Huerta and on into Burroughs. Let me see if I can just grab one more thing here. Here, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I've run out of time.
Do you have like one more sentence?
Yes, I do. We're not the only parents that are experiencing this. In fact, today, 2 sets of parents contacted my wife and I about the frustrations they're having in the very same arena. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Catherine Howard.
Hello, school board. Listening to my husband's frustrations as well as other parents that we spoke with today, it seems that we are doing, as parents, which obviously is not something that we mind doing, but we are actually doing the administrator's job, finding out what's going on, speaking to other parents, bringing the kids together. Whereas these kids, our children, are being called out of classes without us being notified, being asked to write letters, statements, which we think is really inappropriate without legal presentation and us as their guardians being there and being notified prior to the removal of where we think they're in class being educated. So I would definitely like that addressed on account of we have that right as parents to know that our children are either being asked to remove their shoes, their socks, or another child has put a vape contraband in one of our children's backpacks. I believe we as parents should be notified first and foremost before any decision or ask if our child is done. Secondly, rather than come here and just kind of spill at you only, this is going on, we're not satisfied with the VP or the principal themselves, engaging us parents, what can we do to raise funds What can we do a teen concert in the city? Can we bring kids together? Can we bring parents together to really utilize the time to help build these future generations? Because at the end of the day, that is what it is about. The funds are going to go to this time and pretty much be thrown away if there's not a productive outcome for us to work well with the administrative and, you know, just be able to lift them up, educate them, the reason why they're there. You know, I thought maybe things like clear backpacks. So a common thing to make all across Burbank School District. That would definitely help a problem of children thinking twice to carry contraband or pass it on to somebody. Even uniforms. Even, you know, we had a PTA meeting where a child did not want to use the restroom, got a bladder infection because they're terrified to go in the restroom. We've heard of guns at school. There was a sexual assault at school. And while there was a sexual assault, where are the supervisors of this school, the adults that we're entrusting to watch over our children? So these are some real serious concerns amongst many, and I know I'm on a time crunch here. But sincerely, my husband, he's a Burbank native. I've been here for about 12 years now. And we'd really like to find some kind of resource to uplift the quality of Burbank schools. Because they got the blue ribbons, so let's make that real.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Becky, you are our final speaker for the evening.
All right, thank you. I just want to, before I mention what my card was about, I want to stand up for the BTA educators that we have, our nurses, our teachers, speech and language, counselors. I want you to know that day in and day out, they are working very hard every day. These are people who come to work early, they stay after work, they come in on the weekends, and this is all elementary and secondary. And I believe that we do work hard enough to want fair compensation, to be able to take care of our families. And I think most of you who do live in Burbank know a 2-bedroom, 2-bath is $2,700. And we've got brand new members, first year or second year, who cannot afford to live in Burbank. They do not qualify. They do not have the income. So I want you to know that I stand up for our members with that California is one of the most expensive states in the whole country. And if we did not make a certain salary, we cannot afford to live here. And we have educators who are no longer going into the profession, a 17% decrease in people enrolling in a teacher program. And so when I hear people talking about that we're overpaid, we have 16 weeks of vacation, please tell me what you're going to do in 10 years when you don't have teachers to teach our students. And so I just want to mention that to you. I also want to talk about our sisters and brothers of CSEA. They are with us every day in the fight to help our students do all that they can. And they deserve the right to be able to have a good salary and increase and to support their families. I've been teaching 21 years, and CSEA does great, and they work just as hard as our educators. So I just wanted to throw it out that we deserve what we get, and we're going to continue to fight for what we want because we want the best here in Burbank. I just wanted to follow up just probably with my last 34 seconds. The new director of fiscal services, I don't recall getting an email from BUSD News about the new hire. I don't know if you guys have that or done that. I think there is a lack of communication within BUSD that needs to be communicated to all of our members from all three labor organizations. I had to ask for the separation letter to be emailed a second time. I think that needs to be out more often. And I think that communication is lacking in Burbank with our employees. And I definitely think we can do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Recky. We'll move to staff responses.
I will start with Nicole Drebecki, and what I would say to you is that I liked your statement. I would probably modify it just a little bit. Yes, I think you deserve what you get, but I think you deserve probably more. And I believe that our teaching staff and our classified staff deserves every penny they get, and I will continue to work to give what we can because I know what your job is. I was an English teacher for 14 years, and the job has only gotten harder. So I understand, and I think you're totally right. As far as the communication on the new employees, you're right. That should have gone out, and we will get that out on the BUSD news. So I apologize for that. Mr. Schlossman, I want to make sure that you understand what the comment meant. When we say there's a lot of communications, particularly around negotiations, the assumption that that's a Brown Act violation is not correct. For months, we're sitting at the table, district staff and our union partners working on negotiations, and you see that on the closed agenda item, and it is documented that we are going to be speaking and updating the board about how negotiations are going with CSEA, how they're going with BTA, and so on. That is documented in there, and that's where we're communicating. I also communicate because I have a weekly meeting with the board president, whether that was with Mr. Ferguson or now Ms. Weisberg, and I update her, and it's a one-on-one conversation. Because they're the board president and I'm the superintendent, and we're communicating, and all that communication is happening, and it's happening correctly. And so when it comes to the board, I understand what your frustration is you're expecting more conversation up here. I get that. But what I'm trying to tell you is it's been 6 months of us having conversations. And so the lack of time that you see up here is because we've done this and we've been doing this, and it's been agendized, and we've been talking about it in closed session, and they are up to date. And it while it may seem a real quick rubber stamp to you, is not the case. Okay, Mr. Howard, what I want to tell you is I'm going to have Dr. Oscar Macias, who's in charge of the secondary, reach out to you and reach out to the principal. Some of the stuff you're explaining to me, I don't know intimate details about, and I want to make sure that they are handled appropriately. I agree. If you look at the data across the United States, what's happening in our middle schools is indicative of what's happening in middle schools across the board, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And we do have to address it, and we do need to bring our families into the fold to figure it out. 100% agree. And I want to acknowledge that. You talked a little bit about like discipline procedures and when students are called out for statements. It's really hard to talk about that in general terms because the way in which the administration responds is dependent on what the situation is. And in a public school, the legal standard is reasonable suspicion. So if there's reasonable suspicion that there's something in a backpack, we can just look in the backpack and figure out what's happening. So I don't know what happened in this specific case, so that's why I'll have Dr. Macias look into that. But I just wanted to give a general context of what the standard is and how we operate, and it's dependent on what the violation was and what information we have. But I will make sure that you get a phone call. Thank you.
Board member responses?
I'm going to start with to Nicole Drebecki. You know, once a long time ago, I was a teacher too, and you would hear this as the sign that was shown where teachers get 6 16 weeks off always offended me, and it still does. It's not getting 6 weeks off as 16 weeks off as if they were paid for that time. They are off 16 weeks. It's backwards, without pay. And these folks work, tirelessly all year, and I think deserve a little more than, they, get 16 weeks off. Really bugs me. So, and I appreciate you coming in and rallying for your unit folks. I'm sure they're appreciative of you as well. And we definitely hear what you're saying and try always do the best we can for all our employees. So thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Howard, it's tough. It's tough to raise kids nowadays. When you're in any place, you just never know what to expect. But I have to tell you, I appreciated you, Mrs. Howard, when you came up to speak to us. And not that I didn't appreciate you, Mr. Howard, but we get emails and letters all the time about things that aren't going particularly right and don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But Mrs. Howard, you came up and you said, hey, can we do this? Can we help? Can we raise some money? And you came up with, I'm here because I want to give you back something to help out all the kids. And no one ever does that. No one ever writes us an email and says, I don't think you should do this, but they don't say, God, I know you're really short on money right now, or this isn't working. What if you did this? And I appreciate that a great deal. And I'd love to hear or have our administrators or Dr. Macias some of those ideas and whatever needs to be done. If you think that's the right way to go, I'm happy to help. Because we all want is a good, safe place for our kids to grow and learn. And I think it takes a village. And so let's create that. Thank you for coming out.
Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
Thank you, Dr. Weisberg. So first to the Howards, thank you for coming down and for sitting through our meeting about meetings in order to give your public comment. I appreciate that. I don't know that tonight was as scintillating as normal. But, I think, as Dr. Pramo said, there are middle school in particular right now it has a lot of issues because students were out of school during a really vital part of their social emotional learning. And there's a lot of work to be done in our schools. I've certainly heard from other parents at Huerta. And when I visit, I see amazing things happening there, right? And so I don't want to discount the fact that I think the staff is trying to do their best, but there's room to grow, for sure. So I trust Dr. Macias will follow up on your particular concerns, but also doing, coaching with those administrators to help them deal with these issues in a way that reflects prioritization of safety of students and making sure that that everybody's seen. Mr. Becky, thank you for coming early, staying late as always. When you said we didn't get a notification about Director of Fiscal Services, I thought, well, yes, we did. But then I thought, oh no, it was just the board that got the introduction to the new folks. And I think, we've talked a number of times about improving communications, and it's hard to, I make up, it's hard for staff to balance sending 1 million emails about every single thing that happens and making sure that people can see that what they see is really important, right? And so, having gotten, let's call it 6 to 8 emails about enrollment over the last couple of weeks, some of which I have probably prompted staff to send myself. I think there can often be a lot of noise, but I appreciate that this is something that we should be communicating to employees about. But that is also my plug to make sure you enroll your students. I enrolled mine today. Thank you.
Dr. Agakanian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Howard family, as a parent of a middle schooler myself, I understand your concerns, but I can tell you that one thing I'm proud of when it comes to our district is when these concerns come forward, as our own superintendent, Dr. Parama said, there will be a call and we will take care of this matter. But I also like the fact that, you want us to work together. That's important. I always tell people there are certain districts that literally balance their budget when it comes to, the district itself working with the nonprofits, with the PTAs. And I think we need to talk more about how our members of our community can get more involved and give back. Either to the foundation we have now, that's official, not only it's a write-off, but I will tell you that these things matter, and I think sometimes people forget that there is a reason why a lot of people want to come to Burbank, and I say it again, and I say it again, it's the schools. So I think we have to remind people that it's important that also, facing these challenges that we have when it comes to budgetary issues, and it's no fault of ours. It has to do with the makeup of our system. It's a middle-class community, let's be honest. I think the more we get people involved, the more we have these conversations. Even a simple giving, you can start a conversation about some of the challenges we have. And I think that's important. It's not always about money. By the end of the day, it is important for people to understand that, the more we talk to people about what the issues are, even when it comes to financing and money, the more we can help our, teachers and faculty and staff. And I will finish with Ms. Dubersky. Did I say Dubecky? Sorry, I was correcting. I have a difficult last name too. I get it wrong sometimes myself. So, it is. It's lengthy. I do appreciate you coming forward and talking about these concerns and reminding people how difficult it is to be a teacher nowadays. And I do believe, because I say this all the time, we keep this up, we're going to have a tough time keeping teachers around, but also, no matter how much technology advances, no matter how AI, I'm dealing with AI right now in my classroom, it's that personal touch that differentiates us. And the teachers are those frontline individuals who come forward. It is difficult. People don't know. I always say, before you complain, go and be a teacher for one day. Let's see how long you're going to last, right? It's difficult. So I do want to thank you and what you stand up for and fight for. But I think together we will overcome all these challenges. So thank you very much.
Thank you. To Mr. Becky, thank you as always. While I, for the first time ever, have been put in a category with Michael Jackson and Prince, which I'm super into, I do not think it is pandering to agree that better compensation for our staff is vital. Making sure that our communities are better when the people who work in them live there, right? There's so many statistics that talk about having firefighters, police, doctors and nurses, and our teachers living where they work just increases the value in myriad ways. And it's not just about living here. It's just also about feeling valued for the enormous amount of work that you invest. And I'm obviously biased because we have the same job in different districts, but it is a 24, I think it's a 24-hour a day job. I go home thinking about my students. I wake up thinking about my students. I am lesson planning. I am grading. I am watching something on TV and saying, oh, this would be great in this class. I have to write down at what moment in this Netflix movie I saw it. So it is a lifetime investment. And we should be investing in you in the way that I know our teachers and our staff and our admin invest in our kids. And it is an investment in our kids when we pay our administrators a livable wage. It is an investment in our kids when we pay our teachers and our classified staff a livable wage. And it just shows ignorance about these unbelievably difficult professions when you trot out unpaid summer vacation that is very rarely a vacation because most of us are working because we don't get paid for those 16 weeks. So I think you know this, but I always welcome it. You never have to tell us. We know. But I do think that the community needs to know too how endlessly important and how endless a job, in often the best way possible, what you do is. So thank you for your continued advocacy. And, I think in many, many ways in the past year, we've done a much better job with communication. We have a ways to go, so it's really helpful to know when we've missed the mark. I have been really happy with where we have come. We still have a ways to go, and maybe someday we'll be able to afford a public information officer who could focus all their time. That would be wonderful, because it is such an integral part of making our district run. To Mr. and Mrs. Howard, thank you so much. I do want to say you don't have to wait to a board meeting to reach out to us. I respond to every email that I get. I know many of the board members do the same, so I don't want you to feel like it's only in these moments. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come in, because what I heard you say is not only about your child, but about all of the kids in BUSD, all of the kids at Huerta. I teach middle school, so I've seen the changes to our kiddos because they miss those pivotal developmental years. I also know, as I think you do too, that the administrators and staff at Huerta, they want the same thing you want. They want these middle school years to be exceptional, and they want the kids to feel safe and loved and protected. And when there's a disconnect there, it's our job to figure out why. So I have total faith that Dr. Macias is going to connect, but I also know the caliber and quality of the staff at Huerta and how deeply they care. And so we just need to figure out where that disconnect is so that you feel that as well. And I want to encourage you, as I said before, if you don't feel like you're getting a response, and I have no doubt that you will, please reach out to us again, because we're here to support not only our staff, but also you and your kiddos. So I hope you feel like you were heard tonight, and I look forward to getting a report back and figuring out where the disconnect in communication and in process is. And this did bring up for me, and this is another thing to thank you for, I do think we need to, and we've had this conversation, but how we're communicating to families our established discipline policies, right? We have them, they're written down. How are we communicating them? How are we sharing them? What's the process? So that parents know, oh, the school is going to search my kiddo's backpack if X. They're going to call me if Y. So that we have that written down. And I know it's on the website, but we also know that the website is a vast abyss into which everything falls. So how we can better let our parents know before the school year begins, hey, here are the policies we have in place. Call us with questions, but so that you're not wondering, why did they do X or Y? We know why. Doesn't mean you can't still come back, but I think we have these policies. I think we can do a better job of sharing them. So there's less sort of opaqueness around the procedures we follow, knowing that we do give discretion to our principals and our APs and our counselors because they're exceptional at what they do, and every school and every student is different. So I think that's something you made me think about, how important it is that we're really clear in letting our families know what the existing policies are, and engaging in conversation around them. So I thank you for that really important reminder. Anything else? Okay, so thank you to everybody. We are going to adjourn tonight at 9:33.